So we'll have to prepare for the next one. That, I'd say is will get attention this time. But particularly as you get into October and November, this thing will be back in big numbers if we don't restrain our behavior more than it looks like we are right at the moment.
What do you think in terms of a timeline? Are we looking at life getting back to normal by next spring, next summer, next fall? What's your best data tell you?
Well, the rest of this year will not be normal. And, the sooner we deliver that somewhat bad news to people so they can get ready for what will be a tough fall, the better.
Well, here we are, mid-October 2020, and wouldn't you know it, old Bill was right. None of this seems even remotely normal. And news of the rising number of COVID-19 cases is everywhere, just as the World Health Organization admitted on October 10th that lockdowns, as the primary means of control of this virus, have been ineffective. Only now that we've realized innumerable consequences economically, socially, psychologically, and otherwise. As a result of these totalitarian measures for the past 8 months, do we get this information? I've documented in previous videos how maddening this psyop has been with the inconsistencies, the contradictions, the multiple narrative collapses, and again, this humiliation, this mass gaslighting, this psychological abuse is all by design. Everything seems to be going according to plan. So now that cases are increasing and lockdowns are not effective, where do you think we go from here? Well, in some places it seems that we'll try locking down again. Maybe the results will be different this time, knowing full well that by doing so we're defining the word insanity. If you've been paying attention, you can probably make an educated guess about where exactly we are going. And that is to say, in the direction of further totalitarian control. In my interview with James Perloff last week, we discussed the following quote by Theodore Dalrymple, which seems to encapsulate our current reality perfectly. The purpose of progressive propaganda is not to persuade or convince, not to inform, but to humiliate. And therefore, the less it corresponds to reality, the better. When people are forced to remain silent, when they are being told the most obvious lies, or even worse, when they are forced to repeat the lies themselves, they lose once and for all their sense of probity. To assent to obvious lies is in some small way to become evil oneself. One standing to resist anything is thus eroded and even destroyed. A society of emasculated liars is easy to control. Doesn't this all seem humiliating to you? None of it seems to correspond to reality. And don't you kind of just feel dirty being complicit in it all? Because we are assenting to obvious lies. Those of us who've had questions all this time, we've known what they're doing. They've been telling us all along. They haven't even tried to hide it. And there we all are, just floating eyeballs above a piece of fabric that barely even manages to mask our contempt for it all. I know you feel it too. That's what this is designed to do. To assent to obvious lies is in some small way to become evil oneself, and that's not a good feeling. If you're a good person, it doesn't feel right at all. It's hard to find the silver lining here, but it's good to keep in mind that what you're feeling in response to this, whether it's anger, disgust, hatred, or just frustration or annoyance, it's a perfectly reasonable response to being dragged into such an unholy wreck. There are good people speaking out, though. Many are filing lawsuits alleging negligence by companies, employers, and state and federal governments. Dr. Rainer Fuhlmich and the 4 members of the German Coronavirus Investigative Committee have been taking evidence and listening to testimonies of large numbers of international scientists in order to pursue charges of crimes against humanity. The Great Barrington Declaration has been signed by thousands of scientists, doctors, and those in the general public. Of course, in the mainstream media, barely any of this registers at all. And when it is covered, it is done so by using cheap smear tactics and subjected to what can only laughingly be referred to as fact-checking. On October 20th, Adam Green's No More News became the latest victim of pervasive censorship attacks by tech oligarchs against alternative media outlets. It's hard to tell anymore if they are resorting to such blatant totalitarian measures out of desperation and losing control of the narrative, or if they just don't care anymore. Of course, it could be both. Either way, none of this is normal. None of this makes any sense logically, but I've come to expect such humiliating nonsense as part of life in this sick, inverted new normal, just as I'm sure you have as well. Everything seems to be going according to plan.